In February 2010, the people of New York were horrified to discover the dismembered remains of a woman scattered in garbage bags across multiple locations in the Bronx. A dog walker was the first to find some of the remains when their dog was attracted to the scent emanating from one of the bags. On closer inspection, they discovered a dismembered human limb and immediately called the police. Before we dive into this chilling case, join the Beyond the Crime community. Like the video, comment your thoughts below, and hit subscribe for more haunting tales. Thank you. Investigators spent the morning scouring through piles of trash in the South Bronx neighborhood after the horrifying discovery by a dog walker at around 4:30 a.m. One by one, a decapitated head, right leg, torso, and hands were unearthed in the area around Eagle Avenue, 158th Street, 156th Street, and Caldwell Avenue. The dismembered body would be identified as 45-year-old Tanya Bird. Tanya Bird's battle with drug addiction had begun in her late teens, approximately the early 1980s. She had periods of sobriety, often attending Narcotics Anonymous meetings in the area, but relapses were frequent, particularly when struggling with the pressures of raising two sons with limited support. While she worked hard to provide for her children and maintain her job as a home health aide, the lingering effects of her addiction cast a shadow over her relationships, particularly with Bassid, who often felt neglected and resented her choices. Her addiction led to periods where Child Protective Services intervened, resulting in Bassid being placed in foster care starting around 1995. During her periods of sobriety, Tanya was known in the community for her kindness and willingness to help others, often volunteering at a local soup kitchen. In an effort to remain close with her, the soup kitchen would allow for a small group of family members to volunteer at the same time. The facility even began to offer a summer day camp for troubled youths, and Nazir attended for many years. Tanya truly loved her son and tried her best to take care of him in any way she could. She had been dismembered and then stuffed inside heavy-duty garbage bags, which had then been stuffed inside duffel bags. Some of Bird's body parts were still wearing the clothes she was in when she was slaughtered. Police confirmed that Bird's son, Bassid MacLean, reported her missing at the Bronx 40th Precinct. He told police he hadn't been able to contact his mother for at least a day. This was very unusual, as Tanya had a younger son called Nazir, who had Down syndrome and was very dependent on her. Despite her struggles, Tanya Bird was fiercely devoted to her younger son, Nazir, who has Down syndrome, born in approximately 2004. She was his primary caregiver, ensuring he received the necessary medical care, therapy, and educational support. She was active in local support groups for families with special needs, children, and advocated for his rights and inclusion. Her dedication to Nazir was a source of strength and purpose in her life, and her sudden death left him particularly vulnerable and traumatized. He struggled with grief and with the sudden disruption of his routine, requiring specialized care and support to cope with the loss of his mother. MacLean, who suffered from learning difficulties himself, told his aunt, Cassandra MacLean, that Bird's former boyfriend dropped by on Monday, and that was the last time he saw her. "He came over yesterday and walked out with her in the morning," he said. Cassandra believed Bird's allegedly abusive ex-boyfriend was responsible for her horrific murder and dismemberment. "I told my sister to stay away from him, but she said he's harmless and not to worry." Cassandra also said that her sister was a loving mother and very devoted to her son. That's what she lived for. That's her joy in life. Bassid MacLean found a photograph of his mother on his phone, which police later matched to the decapitated head found in one of the bags. Bassid MacLean's childhood was marked by instability. He was first diagnosed with conduct disorder at the age of 10, around 1996, and later with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder in his late teens, early 2000s. His time in foster care was inconsistent, with multiple placements due to behavioral issues and difficulties adapting to different family environments, beginning approximately 1995. Records show he was prescribed antipsychotic medications, specifically Risperdal, and attended therapy sessions sporadically, often discontinuing treatment when he turned 18, around 2004, and gained more independence. His resentment towards his mother stemmed not only from her addiction, but also from the perceived lack of stability and emotional support during his formative years. He often expressed feelings of abandonment and believed that his mother prioritized her addiction over his well-being. He would often tell stories about his time in foster care. He was placed with many families who would scream and curse at him constantly. He had a hard time developing connections with the other youth he lived with and was often the target of ridicule and bullying. When police showed up at his house, they noticed it reeked of bleach. This is when they discovered the carving equipment and eventually found more photos on his phone. MacLean posed in front of the bathroom mirror, holding the bloody head of his mother like a trophy, and used his phone to snap the grisly photo as a keepsake. I think what is most disturbing about this photo is that he is smirking. There were other photos of MacLean and his mother's corpse. It appears that he had some kind of photo shoot. It turned out MacLean had stabbed his mother in the neck, killing her before dismembering her. It is reported that he held huge resentments against his mother because he was raised in foster care while his mother battled drug addiction. He came back to live with her and his younger brother when he was 18. He was also suspected of abusing his younger brother, whose body began displaying bruises. He was fiercely jealous of the attention his mother gave to his younger brother. His grandfather, James MacLean, said that his grandson often did destructive things, such as setting fires, and they had trouble controlling him. Tanya herself was terrified of her own son. He was on probation after attacking 2 police officers with a knife back in February 2010. The initial attack allegedly happened because Tanya asked her son, who was 26 at the time, to grow up and move out of the apartment and become a man. Her frustrations could be understood, as the 3 of them, Bassid, Tanya, and Nazir, all shared a bedroom. MacLean was also out of control by this point, and it was not good for either his mother or brother to be around. MacLean dismembered her body with the assistance of another man. This second man would be identified as MacLean's friend, 26-year-old William Harris. William Harris initially denied any involvement in the murder, but later admitted to assisting Bassid MacLean in dismembering and disposing of the body. He claimed he acted under duress, fearing for his own life and the safety of MacLean's younger brother. However, prosecutors argued that Harris actively participated in the crime, helping to purchase the power saw and transport the body parts. During his trial, Harris testified that MacLean had threatened to harm his family if he didn't help. However, the prosecution presented phone records and witness statements that suggested Harris was a willing participant. They went to a hardware store in the Bronx to purchase a power saw and rubber gloves, and they returned to the apartment to chop up Miss Bird's body. Afterwards, attempts appear to have been made to clean bloodstains in the apartment with bleach. At the crime scene, forensic investigators discovered significant amounts of blood in the bathroom and bedroom of the apartment. A power saw, purchased earlier that day, was found with traces of blood and tissue. The shower curtain, identified as the one missing from the bathroom, was used to wrap Tanya Bird's dismembered remains before they were placed in garbage bags. DNA analysis confirmed that the blood and tissue found on the saw and in the apartment belonged to Tanya Bird. Investigators also found several handwritten notes in Bassid's room expressing his anger and resentment towards his mother, including passages that described fantasies of violence and revenge. A key piece of evidence was a receipt found in MacLean's pocket from the hardware store, time-stamped just hours before the murder, confirming the purchase of the saw and gloves. Surveillance video outside the flat appears to show MacLean and Harris carrying numerous bags out of the building's elevator before wheeling them away in a shopping trolley. Cassandra MacLean said, "My nephew is a monster. This murder was premeditated." Shortly after the grisly discovery, the victim's 23-year-old son, Bassid MacLean, would be arrested and charged with the murder of his mother. Harris was also arrested on charges of unlawfully dissecting a human body and hindering prosecution. During the interrogation, they both blamed each other. MacLean claimed that he left the apartment he shared with his mother at around 3 a.m. on Monday morning to withdraw cash, only to find that his friend, William Harris, had stabbed his mother to death in his absence. He reportedly said that Harris had threatened to kill him and his 6-year-old brother as well if he did not help dispose of the body. Harris, who had been arrested 12 times prior, claimed that MacLean had already killed his mother, showed him a photograph of her body while they were on the subway, and begged for his friend's help in getting rid of the remains. It strikes me as odd that Harris would get involved in such an act if he had not participated. Maybe he was aware of the premeditation of the act. MacLean confessed to the sickening crime after police found a shower curtain missing at his apartment. It was later found wrapped around his mother's body parts in one of the bags dumped on the curb for collection. He was led out of the house in handcuffs after police recovered the frightening evidence in the apartment. MacLean's little brother was also present during the attack and dismemberment, but fortunately did not see any of it directly. MacLean would later appear in court wearing only a garbage bag. According to his defense attorney, he had been urinating on himself and had no other clothing. He said that his client was off his medication. However, he didn't elaborate on what that medication was, and that his client was going to be undergoing psychiatric evaluation. In court, MacLean professed his innocence, shouting, "I didn't do anything wrong. I don't need anything at all." MacLean's legal team argued that he was mentally ill and did not know what he had done was wrong, which he himself had initially argued. Holding up a photo of MacLean with his mother's severed head, his legal representative, Lynn Kalavaca, asked the court during the trial, "Does this look like someone who is doing is wrong?" A tape was played in court where MacLean admits to butchering his mother. He said, "If you don't have the stomach to cut them up after killing them, then you're a coward." On the day of the sentencing, some of the family members spoke. Bassid MacLean's 75-year-old grandfather, James MacLean, told his grandson he would forgive him for killing his mother, but he would never forget it. "I love you," his grandfather told him. "I was the one to teach you how to walk. You broke my heart." Bassid's sister, Portia Lover, told her brother, "You have destroyed my faith in humanity by taking away the one person in my life who believed in me." "Why did you take away my mommy?" she asked. "Why did you take away Nazir's mommy?" When given a chance to speak, Bassid MacLean apologized for his actions, which he said have been haunting his thoughts and keeping him up at night. He also admitted that what he did to his mother wasn't called for. "Whatever sentence y'all give me doesn't matter. It was something that happened. I did it. I apologize." MacLean's defense attorney, Lynn Kalavaca, argued that her client is a mentally ill man suffering from schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. She stated that he had been hearing voices since he was a child and that incarceration would do nothing to help him. Cassandra MacLean, Bird's sister, said that her nephew was a danger to society and should be jailed for life. If he could do that to his own mother, imagine what he could do to a stranger. "I don't hate him. I pity him," she said. Cassandra, who is now caring for her sister's special needs youngest son, Nazir, said in court she never wants to see her murderous nephew again. "Today my siblings, Nazir and I, say goodbye, knowing this will be the last time we will ever see you, and the last time you will see the family who loved you unconditionally." MacLean was found guilty of second-degree murder, which means it was considered an intentional killing but not premeditated. He was sentenced to 25 years to life imprisonment. Harris was charged with tampering with physical evidence and hindering prosecution. He eventually pleaded guilty to hindering prosecution in the second degree and received a sentence of 1 to 3 years in prison. He was released on parole after serving 2 years. This would be enough tragedy for most families, but approximately a year after MacLean was sentenced for murdering his mother, his wife was charged with the murder of their son. The South Bronx neighborhood where Tanya Bird and her family lived faced significant challenges, including high rates of poverty, unemployment, and crime. Access to mental health services and affordable housing was limited, creating additional stress for families struggling to make ends meet. The lack of resources and support networks contributed to a cycle of violence and instability, making it difficult for individuals like Tanya and Bassid to overcome their personal struggles. Studies have shown that communities with limited access to healthcare and social services often experience higher rates of domestic violence and mental health issues. Before he savagely attacked his mother, he was married to a woman called Bassid MacLean, who changed her name to Zara Coombs after her husband's crimes had been committed. She was raising their 4-year-old son, Zamir, who was just 3 months old when his dad murdered his grandmother. Zara Coombs had a history of her own trauma and instability. She had grown up in foster care, similar to Bassid, and had struggled with mental health issues, including depression and anxiety. The family service records highlight a background of neglect and emotional deprivation during her early life. She met Bassid in a group home where both were living. She gave birth to her son, Zamir, shortly after the murder. After marrying Bassid in 2011, she changed her name to Zara MacLean to distance herself from her past and rebuild her life, but the shadows of her husband's crime continued to haunt her. Following her husband's imprisonment, she found herself struggling with single parenthood. She suffered from extreme postpartum depression after the birth of her 1-month-old. There were documented instances of Zara's struggles with managing anger and frustration, particularly towards Zamir, whom she found challenging to care for. The domestic dispute between Zara and Jamari Richardson the night before Zamir's death was related to financial stressors and Zara's feelings of being overwhelmed. At the time of Zamir's death, Zara was unemployed and struggling to make ends meet, relying on public assistance and the support of her boyfriend. His aunt, Cassandra MacLean, said, "A child kills his mother, and then the mother kills her child. Ridiculous. What are we coming to? Ain't this crazy?" Zamir had been targeted by his mother when he accidentally dropped an egg on the floor in the kitchen. Coombs then beat Zamir to death with a broom handle and put him in a plastic storage bin filled with water. Cassandra MacLean said her nephew and Coombs met in a group home and that their family was against her marrying him. "We weren't against her. We were against Bassid." She said, "My nephew was no good. He was a bully. He didn't work. He lived off his mother. We couldn't understand what she saw in him." Cassandra also added that she had only found out about the fatal beating of the 4-year-old boy when she received a phone call about the tragedy. She said that she had only seen Zamir once when he was less than a year old. "I cried this morning," said Cassandra. "I did a lot of crying. How do you beat a child that bad? How do you beat a child to death with a broom? What made you so angry? He was 4 years old." During an interview on Rikers Island, Coombs cried while discussing her son's death. "He's gone, and it's all my fault." Coombs, who was on suicide watch during the time of the interview, added, "My life is over. Nothing will ever be the same. My baby is gone." She is blaming her rage on postpartum depression and said that she can't remember hitting Zamir with the broomstick. As she claims the memory is blacked out, all she recalls is a mix of noises from inside the family's basement apartment, including the TV blaring and cries from both her 1-year-old and 1-month-old boys. She said that Zamir was trying to help her make lunch, as he loved food and wanted to be a chef. "He called you a meatball or a chicken nugget. That was his way of saying he loved you." After blacking out, Coombs said that she remembered the 4-year-old boy still being alive. "He was humming," Coombs remembered. "He looked at me, but he didn't say anything. I said, 'Okay, baby, let's get you a warm bath.'" She said that she apologized and told the toddler that she loved him before putting him in a storage bin for a bath. Coombs said that she fell asleep whilst trying to breastfeed the 1-month-old baby and was awoken by her boyfriend, 26-year-old Jamari Richardson, who came home from work to find the boy unconscious in the bin. "He went under," Richardson said, and I said, "What do you mean under? There's barely any water. There's nothing to go under." He called 911 immediately, and paramedics found the boy unconscious, not breathing, and foaming at the mouth. But the little boy died after doctors attempted to revive him 3 times at the hospital. Of hitting the 4-year-old boy, she said, "I lost it. That was a panic attack. If I could have banged my head any harder and banged it open instead of striking Zamir, I would have done it. Now, every time I close my eyes, I see his face, hear his voice. I just talk to him all night." After her arrest, over the next several hours, Coombs's story about what happened changed several times. At first, she said that Zamir slipped on a wet towel and hit his head on the toilet when she wasn't looking. But under police interrogation, Coombs admitted to beating the boy with a broomstick after her patience wore thin while she was caring for his 2 younger siblings when he just dropped an egg on the floor. She grabbed a broomstick and beat him until he was silent, then went back to tending to the other kids while he slumped under the water in the plastic storage bin that she had been using to bathe him. Abrasions were found on the boy's neck, and bruises covered various parts of his body. Neighbors said that Coombs and her boyfriend argued a lot. In fact, police were called to the residence just the night before for a domestic dispute between Coombs and Richardson. Coombs's 3 other children, a 9-year-old, a 1-year-old, and a 1-month-old, are now in the care of Child Services. After further investigation in 2011, the medical examiner determined that Zamir's death was caused by blunt force trauma and drowning. Bruises and abrasions covered his body. Zara Coombs MacLean was charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter. During her trial in 2012, her defense attorney argued that she was suffering from severe postpartum depression and had a diminished capacity due to her mental health history. However, the prosecution presented evidence of her changing stories and the severity of the abuse Zamir endured. Ultimately, Zara Coombs was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Her remaining children were placed in the care of Child Services, severing the ties of any possibility of reunification. Her boyfriend, Jamari Richardson, was never charged in the case. He cooperated with authorities and testified during Zara's trial. That's the tragic tale of a family torn apart by addiction, resentment, and unthinkable violence. A story that lingers long after the final cut. What do you think drove these lives to such dark ends? Share your thoughts below and stick with Beyond the Crime as we unravel more mysteries that echo beyond the crime scene. Until next time, stay curious.